Welcome back to the Monmouth Basketball Hawks Nest podcast. We are back with a new season of Monmouth Basketball. We have a lot more questions this year than expectations for the first time in a while. Expectations are not winning the conference in West Long Branch. It's a little bit lower with a younger group, a rebuilding group. We are in a new conference going from the MAC to the Colonial. So switching conferences for the first time in 8 or 9 years, the big jump up for this young Monmouth squad. But we are going to get into all that tonight, from guys on the roster, expectations for them. We're going to get into the schedule, kind of what the season might look like, because I got to tell you, for the first time in 12, 13 years being a Monmouth fan, I do not have expectations for this season at all. My rankings and my possible record for them is all over the place by the day. So we're going to get into all of that right now. So before we get started, reintroducing the gentlemen that don't need an introduction, I have Mike and Mark back on with us. Mark's been with me since about halfway through the first season. I started this 5 or 6 years ago, and Mike joined us for some time last year. He'll be a regular this year, and we'll try to get some more guests on this year. So first of all, how are you guys doing? And are you ready for this college basketball season? Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right, tonight that it's the official start of college basketball, but because Monmouth's not playing, it doesn't really feel like it for me. So that just kind of shows how Monmouth-centric I am when it comes to college basketball. However many teams around the country are starting off, the big schools are playing the low D1s, and a whole bunch of low D1s are playing non-D1s. So everybody runs their schedule differently, and as we know with King Rice and his non-conference schedule, just like any others, absolutely loaded, starting with Seton Hall Wednesday night in the debut of Shaheen Holloway up in Newark.
A whole lot of 92 to 56 games going on this week. All right, Mike, what's going on?
Not much. It's a great time of year if you're a college sports fan. We still got some college football kind of in the thick of it. Unfortunately for us, we don't probably not looking at playoffs this year for Monmouth, but that's all right. But there's still a lot of great action going on nationally. Even looking at our new league with the CAA, and now we kind of start up college basketball season. We got some overlapping schedules, so really starting to heat up. Like you said, Ryan, there's a bunch of this is bye game season. I think is John Rothstein's favorite time of year. So it's it's really exciting to kind of get looking at what we have with both the non-conference schedule and then what that'll lead into with the CAA. So really looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to my first epitome of brutality tweet from John Rothstein when somebody loses 100K over a bye game when they're 33-point favorites. That's always fun to watch early in the season. And Mama's been there quite a few times over the last 10 years.
Shout out John Rothstein. He blocked me on Twitter because I didn't agree with him on something. So I could care less what that joker has to say on his Twitter. Ryan, you can follow him and give him all the interaction you want. For me, he's one of the worst college basketball follows you could follow.
Listen, that's your take. That's fine. I don't love the guy. That's fine with me. I just like that tweet when it comes out once in a while. Being the low guys.
It wouldn't be us without a hot take to start the season.
No, that's what we do. So getting into the schedule, we are opening with a schedule that is very typical to what King Rice likes to do with his Monmouth program. He does not play cupcake games. He does not play D2, D3 games like Rutgers or older brothers up North Jersey that play a garbage schedule for the whole first full month. And all right, Rutgers is 8-1, yay! And they played North Texas 3 times, and nobody cares. So King Rice does not go that way. He challenges his teams. He wants them ready for battle when conference play starts. And he also looks at it as an opportunity to get all these guys experiences, which is awesome. And it's a great recruiting idea. And again, we go back and forth King Rice on this show, but one of his really good traits is it's a great recruiting tool, being able to tell a kid, you're going to go to something like North Carolina, Kansas. You'll see the ones coming up this year. They've been to pretty much every high major you can think of besides Duke, because that's not going to happen with King Rice. But everyone else, we've played everybody. I mean, you name a blue blood we haven't played. We played Kentucky 2 or 3 times. I mean, he's not afraid to go against anybody. And typically, if we have a decent team that year, we're in those games. And once in a while, we get our doors blown off a little bit, but usually we're very competitive. So this year, we open up at Seton Hall Wednesday night. We are at Virginia Friday night. We go to Illinois after that. Later on we have Princeton on the schedule. You play a really good Rider team that's going to elevate in the MAC this year. And all the other mid-majors, Norfolk, Colgate, all teams that you see in the NCAA tournament more often than not. So even if it's not a big-time name, we're not playing the bottom of the conferences. We are playing either quality mid-major opponents or the high-major teams. So I like the way we do it. The record is not always pretty when we start conference play, but they always seem to kind of outperform expectations. And it's a great way to get ready for this very big step up for the Colonial. So either of you guys, how do you feel about the schedule kind of to start the season here before Colonial play?
Go ahead, Mark.
It's a murderer's row to start at Seton Hall, at Virginia, at Illinois. Missed also, we're playing at Syracuse in December. So we got that one as well. The other thing that's been overlooked when you look at this schedule is you think, oh, all right, Norfolk State, Colgate, yeah, they're perennial powers in their own mid-major leagues. We know how good Rider is. They return almost everyone from last year besides Demencio Vaughn. Manhattan's got their own issues over there. That game got a lot easier. What a disaster. I mean, for everyone who is a college basketball fan, be happy that your administration is not running things like the clown show that is happening in the Riverdale Bronx. Shout out to Monmouth and their athletic department for running things in a professional manner. You get a home game. You're at Princeton. They're always one of the top Ivy League schools. Home games against Charlotte and Yale. Charlotte's in a bigger conference. Yale's always one of the better teams in the Ivy League. Like I said, then you're going to Syracuse in December. And the other thing is the top to the middle of the CAA looks to be stronger than the typical, second tier and middle of the MAC. So overall, it's going to be a long, grueling 31 games with this schedule, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's the type of schedule, I think, on paper at least, that could, really make or break you before you even play your first conference game. One of the things that stands out to me, I think, is the fact that we're playing Rider in Manhattan. And just from the perspective of we're a program that, just moved up to a new league. And, it's not really common that a team moves up to a new conference and then the very next year they're playing a non-conference road game at teams in the old conference. So I guess kudos to King Rice for taking that on and being willing to go into those environments where both of those programs are going to want to have one out for Monmouth and are going to have them in their crosshairs. And on paper for our guys, right, it's 5 new starters who you'll maybe looking at that and saying, hey, like that's a MAC opponent that's beneath us, and they're going to have to be ready to play those games. And looking at where those are in the season at that point, that's one of the things that I'm looking at the most, right? Because the bye games are the bye games. There's 4 of them. You got, like you mentioned, you got some good tests on with some quality mid-major opponents, but that's something I'm looking at where I'm saying, all right, like that's gonna tell us a lot about what kind of season it's gonna be based on how we do against, I think, Rider and Manhattan.
Yeah, the games that kind of jump out to me, definitely Seton Hall right away. Getting the game against Schott, I start his career at Seton Hall. No big surprise there. Him and King were pretty tight at the end there when they were in the MAC. Beat us in the championship last year. King talked about it in the press conference at the end that maybe he would be an assistant for Seton Hall one day. So they're obviously very tight. I think it's an interesting game because it's the beginning of Shaw's career outside of the joke that was the St. Peter's school and gym. And before they made their run, really had nothing to stand on as an athletic department. So going from that to Seton Hall is a lot of pressure. It's a brand new team. He had to bring some of his own guys. He got some brand new guys in there. I think they were picked like 7th in the Big East by the bigger polls. So he's got a lot to prove there. And this King Rice team really has nothing to lose in this game because no one has any expectations. We've been picked between 8th and 13th out of 13 in the Colonial. There's no expectations for this game. So really, Mama's got nothing to lose. They can go fire away. and it's kind of a dangerous trap game almost for Seton Hall. I mean, listen, the odds are we'll probably be 20-point underdogs in this game, something around there. But it's one of those games Shaw's got to watch out a little bit and make sure he doesn't take us for granted. And the other game I'm looking at is that Rider game we were talking about. That's been one of the toughest places for Monmouth to win. Even when they had the golden years with Justin Robinson and those guys, Justin had to bring him back from 13 down with 3 minutes to go. I was at the game and win it basically at the buzzer. And that Rider team wasn't even that good. So, no matter what team they put on the floor with Kevin Baggett and those guys, it's always a tough environment. They hate us in that student section. Anytime we go there, that place is filled up. They make it the senior night and awards, and they get every 500 athletes in the building, and they know what to do when we come to town. And you wonder if they'll still do that or not, because it's not going to be later in the season. They'll find a way to get people in the gym when we're there. It was kind of nice to knock them out of the semifinals last year, but that's a tough place to play. They're a loaded older team, and they are not going to forget what Monmouth did last year. Just because it's not the same guys in those uniforms doesn't mean that they're going to forget that we bounced them last year. I think that's one of the tougher non-conference games that you will see, besides the high major games that we kind of expect to go a certain way. So those are the games that are really sticking out to me in the non-conference. So going into our schedule in the Colonial. So it's all new teams that we're looking at here. We're not seeing Manhattan and Quinnipiac and the empty gym up there and Fairfield. These are all pretty state-of-the-art, really nice arenas. They are bigger schools. UDEL is like 10, 12,000 kids plus. Towson's a big school. We are one of the smaller schools in the conference. So we're no longer the crown jewel of the conference like we were in the MAC, where nobody really had an arena to kind of snub up to us. We're just about average with everybody else now. You're looking at UNC Wilmington, who I think opened up against Carolina last night or tonight. I think they were playing UNC, if I got that right.
We know who you're cheering for in that one.
It's not North Carolina and that idiot running the helm over there. You're looking
at Carolina today. They lost 85-61, but that's a pretty good.
Yeah. I was not rooting for Carolina in that one. I knew they had it coming up though.
Just so you know, NCA&T is going against our Edward Waters, Elon against Erskine, Delaware against Wilmington. So it's all over the map with these CAA teams, and the different ways that everyone in Division I schedules. I would hate if Monmouth was starting against a non-D1 school at home. So
they're being like on the Rutgers way. They're going to play Georgian Court for the first few games.
Yeah, you know what? Like an exhibition, you want to have a public exhibition against a non-D1. That's great, but I don't know. It's such a loser mentality to be scheduling a non-D1 in your regular season. It's one thing when you are, the bottom of the barrel of Division I, like the NEC or the America East, and you need to have, 1 or 2 non-conference home games because no one wants to go to you. But at the Colonial, like NCA&T, Elon, Delaware, I'm not impressed right now with the way that you're starting your season.
Like if you lose that game, you're basically saying, all right, sorry, we blew the 2-bid potential for our conference. Like, you can't play games like that. Like it just does nothing for you. There's absolutely nothing for you. It just adds a game to the schedule.
Yeah, and I think eventually it comes back to bite a lot of those teams who take on, non-Division I opponents, especially you look at, teams like you mentioned, Rutgers, like high majors, where, you schedule somebody as non-D1. They got lucky last year where they started with a couple 300 losses and then they were able to come back and make good of it. But if those were games where they, even if they didn't lose them, but they played, somebody that's Division II or Division I, like they wouldn't have made the tournament. So I mean, even it goes for seeding too. So like if you have a team that wins the CAA, but you're looking at, a couple of cupcakes, and that's what you put on your schedule in the beginning of the year, that could be the difference between a 14 to 16 to 13. So.
Shout out to and Mary hosting Mid-Atlantic Christian on Thursday and Stony Brook against Miami Hamilton on Friday. So it seems awesome. Like this is a Colonial thing to do. Hopefully, we don't get sucked into that.
No, I don't think King's going for that at all. Really don't. So speaking of the King Rice and his staff and his roster coming up here, he's bringing back Rick Callahan, staple since he's been at Monmouth. Bringing back Brian Reese. He was an assistant for the first probably 3 or 4 years in the King Rice era. He went off to Georgian Court to be a head coach in D2. He went to, I think, Illinois State, if I'm not mistaken. He bounced around a little bit, and we're happy to have him back in West Long Branch. He helped build those gigantic Justin Robinson, Micah Seaborn runs. He was part of some of that. We bring in Clive Bentick. I've heard a lot of good things about him. He's been an assistant coach for a long time. King talked about him easily being able to be a head coach right now. I've read a lot of good things about him in the media, so I'm looking forward to see what he can do, especially in recruiting, hopefully. We bring back Josh James and then Chris Schifano as the sack for the team. And then getting into this roster, it's going to look a lot different, guys. This is not Shavar Reynolds. It is not George Pappas. It is not Walker Miller, Marcus McClary, Ruddy, any of these. Like, we're missing everybody. So coming back this year, you get Jack Holmstrom back, who we know did not get a lot of minutes his first couple of years, unproven, but trying to make a stride this year. Teron Allen got some time last year in the beginning, but not a lot. Miles Ruth played a lot his freshman year, got bumped a little bit last year because of Shavar coming in. He takes over the point guard this year. We bring back Jakari Spence as a walk-on. We bring back Miles Foster, had a huge year. We need more minutes out of him. We bring back Clement Vuga. Didn't get a lot of minutes at all the last couple of years. Only spotty 3 or 4 minutes here and there. Jarvis Vaughn is kind of one of the leaders of this team. We really need him to be on the court. We'll get more into that. And we bring back Taj Crowley, who we did not see last year. Other than that, it's a whole new team, guys. I mean, Jaden Doyle, Andrew Ball, Jack Collin, Sam Fagan, Jarrett Valencia, Aman Sandhu from India. We have a whole new group of players in this team you've never heard of before the last few months. And we're going to get into all these guys right now. It's just a whole new team. And like I said, this is where the podcast and King Rice have very similar views this year. We don't always have the same views, and we try to respect each other the best we can sometimes. It doesn't always happen. But, we have to temper expectations for this team. If you go and get season tickets and expect to hang a banner at the end of the year, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not likely. It is not last year where we have all these guys ready to roll. It's a building year, guys. It is a rebuilding year. We need to have certain expectations coming into the year that these are young guys. They are mostly freshmen and sophomores, besides a few guys out there. Listen, I want to win more than anybody, like the guys on this screen right now. We are 3 of the biggest fans you're going to find at Monmouth. Hence, we're doing this show for you guys, not getting paid or, not sponsored. We're kind of like NBA TNT, but less popular, sponsored by nobody. That's us. But, we want to win as much as anybody out there for Monmouth. But, guys, it's going to take time this year. And if you see the record start going downhill a little bit, don't give up on the whole team. Go to the games, see what they got. I know we're not going to be selling it out this year in West Long Branch, but do your best to get behind these guys, because this has happened before. And those freshmen, once upon a time, were Justin Robinson and Josh James and Chris Brady and Zach Tillman and Colin Stewart. And 2 or 3 years later, that team was on national TV quite a lot. So I'm not saying that this team should be compared. I'm just saying don't give up on these guys so early just because they're young. We've got to have certain expectations coming in, and it's not to win a championship. It's to build this year. So I want to kind of get that out of the way quickly so King and the coaches know that we are not the ones screaming at them if they lose a few games and things aren't going so good. We're supporting them. We're going back to the games again. Nothing's changing there. Just, know that it's going to be a different kind of year. So what do you guys kind of think of that whole thing and kind of where our roster is at right now?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah. So I think, Ryan, you make a great point as far as setting expectations and, understanding what it is you're watching for. I think really like you said, not so much an emphasis on, winning a CAA championship and getting to the NCAA tournament, but about how we play. And I think one of the benefits, I'll call it, of a season with this type of expectations is you can really expect to see a team that's kind of going to throw caution to the wind, right? Like you're going to go out there, you have a team where you have no legacy starters, right? Everybody's a new starter, calling Miles Ruth a new starter, even though he was a starter as a freshman, but really as a unit, it's all new starting five, right? They're going out there and they're gonna be playing, hopefully hard and fast. And really, I think a fair expectation would be to see them try to come as close to being a 500 team, a winning basketball team, than necessarily competing for a CAA championship and a bid to the NCAA tournament. So really, I think it ends up being, is this a team that can maybe win a couple non-conference games and a couple upsets in the CAA that you didn't see coming, and be shocking teams and saying, all right, wow, like Monmouth can play. And obviously, with that being said, it being a long season and adjustment, that's really what we're looking at. I think it's a fair expectation, and I think that's more so what we should expect than necessarily a team that will roll over and die and lose close to 25 games. I think if that's what happens, I think it's fair for a fan base to say, you know what, guys, like, we expected more competition, more out of a result. But I think it's fair, and Mark, I'm curious to see what you think. I think it's fair to say, all right, like let's come close to winning, to being 500, being a winning basketball team. What do you think?
All right. I feel that college basketball now and college athletics, there should be no rebuilds. It should be a reload with the transfer portal the way it is and immediate eligibility. And before I get into that, many years ago when Ryan first started this podcast, Ryan and I were the ones that were telling everybody not to flip out when Monmouth started with loss after loss after loss.
And the first 8 games I did the podcast, we were 0-8.
Yeah, and we were kind of the voice of reason, which is wild to think when you see how people paint the picture of Ryan and I and how outward and long-winded and just very, we could get a little off tangent sometimes with our takes, but we were very mild-mannered during that time, saying the team was young, that it needed time. There was more talent than people were giving them credit for. I have no idea if there's that much talent on this team. Like this roster, I have as little of a true feel for this Monmouth roster as I've had for any Monmouth basketball roster that I've ever followed throughout my time following Monmouth back to 2004. I will say, again, I'm more of a fan of the reload. I know that Coach Rice and his staff tried that. They went for Brian Antoine, who I think would have been an absolute star in the CAA, would have been the alpha, would have opened everything up for every other guy on this roster. They also went for the Drame twins, which tough, versatile, winners. They would have been great too. If you start to look at this roster, you start to say like, all right, if Valencia and Sandu aren't here, but we had the 2 Drames and Antoine, the roster looks different and our outlook and our conversation is very different. But didn't go that way. King Rice scored 2 of the biggest transfer coups in the nation last year with Shavar Reynolds and Walker Miller. Didn't go his way this year. So then he decided with those last 2 spots to go young. Kind of reminds me of when he went young with Malik Martin and George Pappas many years back now, and Ryan and I didn't agree with it. When you think about it, Malik Martin ended up becoming a really good player. I do believe if he stayed his last year, Monmouth would have won the MAC tournament and been dancing. And then Pappas turned into an all-conference guy, the heart and the soul of the program, and one of the great faces of the Monmouth program over the years. So we don't know what these young guys are going to turn into. But when you have so many young guys and you have so many question marks, and with the way college basketball is, these 13 guys are not all going to be here again next year, no matter what their eligibility is. So this crazy non-conference, this first year in the Colonial, it's going to be a learning slate for everyone, players, coaches, fans. We're going to see, they say the cream rises to the top. We're going to see who is going to separate themselves and fill into those major roles, and who's going to take the back seat, and who's going to continue to be those major building blocks going forward here, and who are going to be gone. And that happened, we referenced this, when Monmouth moved up from the NEC to the MAC after the first year. They kind of got rid of 4 players. They moved on to lower levels, and that something similar is going to end up happening, because you can't have all these guys in one class together, loaded like this. And also, it's just how college basketball and college athletics are. King Rice and his staff, you have to give them a ton of credit, because they've really debunked the transfer out route here in Monmouth, and kept guys here and graduated them. But when you take and you bring in such a young, back-to-back young classes with these redshirt freshmen, with 3 redshirt freshmen, and then all the other freshmen, it's going to be very interesting to see how it gels.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this roster, and if you were to pick a starting lineup opening night, the guys you're going to talk about are Teron Allen and Miles Ruth at guard. You're probably going to mix in Jarrett Valencia there, the freshman star that we're talking about a lot right now, that we just landed last month. Miles Foster, Jarvis Vaughn. You might get a couple freshmen here and there, but those are really the guys that we're going to talk the most about in terms of a starting lineup. But I'll tell you what, King usually throws us for a loop opening night when you don't have the Justin, Josh James, Micah, Hornbeek, and Brady group. Every opening night seems to be like, wow, that guy's starting. Like, it wouldn't shock me to see like Sandu or, Jakari Spence starting at the point. For like, it just, none of that would surprise me, because King always throws a loop in there opening night. But that's the 5 that I think are the most likely. But, I don't hate the roster. All right. I don't love that it's a lot of freshmen, but I don't hate the roster. I actually think they did a good job getting these kids in. Andrew Ball looks like a really solid player. Still like a kind of a skinnier guy, but he's a 6'6" guard. Definitely can get up and dunk it, can shoot the 3 pretty well. One of the best players in South Jersey last year, got a lot of hype. They bring in Sam Fagan out of Neptune. I'm not really sure what to expect with him. I know he had a lot of success at Neptune in the short conference. 6'1" guard. You bring in Jarrett Valencia. That sounds like a monster, 6'9", small forward, power forward, that people were touting as a 3 or 4 star type of kid that had a little bit of eligibility issues, kind of similar to Micah a few years back. And Monmouth got him eligible. A lot of bigger schools passed on him, and he winds up in West Long Branch. We've seen this before work out very, very well in our favor. So I can't wait to watch him play. I'm excited to see if he's a starter or maybe first guy off the bench. They bring in Aman Sandhu from India, first Indian-born player, I believe, in Division I basketball. So kind of a cool flagship moment there for him and for Monmouth, planting that flag in New Jersey. 7'1", guy looks like a monster. They said, his conditioning has to get the par a little bit. You might only see him out there for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. But once his conditioning is there, and if they work with him like they did Brady and Tillman back in the day, that guy might be a beast next year. We might have to be a little patient on him, but I kind of expect him to play this year, because they might need him down low at some point. If Jarvis goes down, they may need some bodies. And who else am I missing here? Jaden Doyle was on the roster last year, redshirted. 6'4" guard, great defender they're talking about. We'll see about his shooting. We don't know yet. Jack Collins coming in from Manasquan, another short conference kid. King going after the Shore this year. 6'5" guard. I got to see him at Jersey Shore this summer in the Jersey Shore League. I thought I'd seen a lot of guys that night, and then nobody showed up. Jack was the only one there. But tough kid, great passer, has amazing court vision out there. Really, really tough, gritty kind of kid. We'll see how he shoots it, and we'll see how the speed of this game compares to what he did in high school and over the summer. But I'm excited to watch him. Who am I missing anybody that's coming in this year? Taj Crowley, I guess, didn't play last year. 6'10" center. And then you have everybody back from last year. So there's a lot of potential on this team. And I do think that 3 or 4 of these kids, I really do believe are going to pop. I think this is going to be a team that will surprise some people this year. And the thing with a young team is, who are they scared of? There's no expectation. This is not last year where it's Walker and Pappas and Shavar's last ride. And if we don't win it now, it's over. We're going to play overseas or enter the workforce like everybody else. Like, it's not like that. These kids have 4 or 5 years left. They're in a new conference. Some of these kids couldn't have dreamed of playing at another school until their sophomore year. And now as freshmen, they're getting thrown into the fire to games immediately. Some of these guys might get 20 minutes a game. So it's kind of cool to see for these guys and what they're going to do. And they're all going to be hungry because they all want minutes. And there's so many kids in those freshman and sophomore classes. And, I think it's going to be one of those things where King rolls the ball out and says, all right, guys, go compete. Go earn a spot. I don't care who wins it. It might be Ball tonight. It might be Collins tomorrow. It might be Holmstrom one night. You don't know kind of how King's going to handle this team yet, especially in a rebuild year, especially when you don't know who those 5 starters are going to be on opening night like we did last year. You could have picked it 2 months in advance with the starters who they were going to be last year. And this year, you just don't know that. So there's something scary about that kind of team where it wouldn't surprise me if they go out and beat a Towson or a Wilmington or a Hofstra this year and surprise them at Monmouth, where we've been so tough over the years at home. I don't know. It's kind of scary when you go up against that and there's no expectations for a team. They might sneak out a few more wins than people expect.
Yeah, it's also going to be harder for
sorry, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
It's also going to be harder for, you figure, if they're trying to figure all this out in the non-conference, by the time they hit that first conference game, 12-28 home for UNC Wilmington, and with the students gone. Mike, I want to make sure to remind you to, make sure that you check in on some of these key dates of the home schedule after I go here. But when UNC Wilmington rolls in, Monmouth still might not have everything, totally determined with role allocation, and they're brand new to the Colonial. They have all these brand new kids, and a whole bunch of them either sat on the bench, didn't play at all, or were in minor or supporting roles last year. They're going to be hard to scout for the opposing Colonial coaches. So that, if we're going to spin it in a way where there's a positive, I agree with Ryan. They're going to be a hard team to scout because by the time CAA play tips off, you might not know, who's the alpha or who are the 1 through 8 for Monmouth or where the shots are being allocated yet.
Yeah, I think as they're kind of feeling that out, kind of 1, the starting roster, and then just 2, time and who actually plays. I think that's something that will be hopefully a little bit of a throwback to some of the building years of King Rice era, where you almost like hockey line changes where you're running the break, you're playing hard defense, you're getting up and down the court, you're putting runs on teams, and then a fresh 5 comes over the boards, and you're really getting 10, 11, 12 guys some run. And like you said, Mark, it makes it hard, I think, for teams to scout. And I think when we have a young team like this, I think when you have good team chemistry, like sometimes you can, sometimes we don't, but when you actually do, and it's a team that you can tell is starting to gel and develop a feel for how each other plays, that's that can be very dangerous for other teams, right? Like, you never want to play a team that feels like it has nothing to lose and looks like they're having a lot of fun. So I think that's something that we can be hopeful for, as the season progresses.
Yeah. And one of those things where you have a team that has no expectations, King is going to roll guys out there like hockey rotations, and he may play some guys 25 minutes one night. They might get 5 or 10 the next night. He may just keep mixing and matching, and you may see one night a Doyle, Ball, Holmstrom, Valencia, Vaughn lineup. And the next night you might see Crowley and Colin and Allen and Ruth and Fagan. Like you don't like he might just keep mixing and matching, and that's going to last a while. And I don't think he's going to go with the same starters over and over again, because you got to find out what you have in these guys. And there's no better time to do that when you're playing in the non-conference games where they don't really mean a whole lot. And it also is it's a tryout for next year. I mean, next year, all right, now these guys are sophomores and juniors. Now going from, all right, we have 18 games. Now if you're 5-13 in the conference this year, you get beat up a little bit. All right, you're a year in. We're expecting, 8-8, 9-7 next year. And we got to see who's ready to do that. If certain guys aren't going to fit the bill and they're not quite what we were looking for, they're going to be out the door and somebody else is coming in. And if you're the guy and you're averaging 10 points a game and you're getting the job done, you're going to be here next year. You'll be a part of that. And we saw that the last time with King Rice, 7 or 8 years ago, when 3 or 4 of those guys weren't really going to make it in the MAC and they were sent packing and transferred out, and he brought in a whole new class. And that's what it's going to be, especially now that transferring is so easy for anybody. You can transfer a million times and nobody cares about anything, it seems like, as long as you're not within the conference. Nobody cares. So it really, this is, to me, it's a big tryout year for these guys, and just to see what we have in this program and what we need in this program. And right now, in my opinion, we need shooters. Like, we have the big guys down low. We have some defensive guys. We have some this is the biggest Monmouth team I can remember in a long time. I mean, when we had the Robinson years, we were, 5'8", 6'5", 6'2", 6'4" with Deion Jones, and Brady was 6'11". Like, we weren't big with that team. We were just very athletic. This team, I mean, most of the team is 6'6" or taller. There's not many guys. You got Ruth and Fagan, but guys that are going to play, you really don't have anybody below 6'5", 6'6". We're a big team this year. Who's going to shoot the ball? I have no idea. They talked about it in the press over the summer that Holmstrom was looking great in camp. Listen, I hope he was. Last year, he didn't shoot it well in the limited minutes that he had. I'm hoping he takes a big step up, because we need somebody not to fill the Pappas role, because you can't replace Pappas. Like, that has to be a combination. It's kind of like the 80s Moneyball thing, where you're trying to replace Jason Giambi with 50 homers and 120 RBIs. You can't just replace it with one guy. Like, Holmstrom's not going to be that guy, but if he can at least contribute some threes and defense, and then Collins hits a few and Ball hits a few, and you're going to have to kind of recreate George Pappas like they recreate Giambi in the movie. Like, that's just kind of the way this team's going to have to go. You can't replace who those guys were and what they did. It's going to have to be a collective effort, and I hope Holmstrom can step it up and make some shots from the three this year. I don't know if, Jack Collins, we don't know how Doyle's going to shoot it. Fagan, like, we just don't know who's going to shoot the ball this year. We look big down low. Foster, if I was a coach looking at the roster right now, I'd just play an easy 2-3 maybe and pack the lane and keep Foster and Vaughn out of it and let guys shoot all day long, because there's just so many unproven kids on this team. And listen, somebody's going to step up. We're not going to just not hit threes this year. Like, somebody's going to hit shots, but we don't know who that is yet. And I'm hoping Holmstrom and Collins and some of these guys can step up and be those guys. But, if you look up and down the roster, you don't see shooters. So somebody's going to have to fill that role, or at least start to fill that role.
So one thing that I know that you said you like the composition of the roster. I'm a little concerned at backup point guard when I look at the composition of the roster. Sam Fagan, I think, is more of a jump shooter than a pure point. And Spence is a walk-on. He's fiery, defensive, super, super athletic. But, if he's not on scholarship, you obviously probably aren't slating him in that role. So backup point guard concerns me. Also, the amount of big bodies on the roster concerns me, because when you start thinking about the way that King Rice's teams won in the past. Now, last year was the year with Quinn and Traore, and then last year with Walker Miller and Ruddy, they changed and they went to the two bigs. So I would think that with the amount of bigs on the roster, we're going to see mostly 2 big lineups, but who knows? So I am interested because it seems like there's a little less flexibility with Foster, Vuga, Vaughn, Crowley, and Sandu. You know, they're playing the 4 or the 5 of those guys. Maybe Jarvis could give you some 3, but you have so many guys that are playing the wing on the roster. You know, it doesn't seem like there's a pressing need for him to play the wing. And Valencia is, you know, that one guy who could play up front and on the wing. I do have to say that, you know, Ryan's saying it's going to be this guy this day. These guys are competing. I agree with it all. I also think that King Rice should be able to experiment more and freely substitute and go back and forth without the fan base really questioning him. Because what the hell do we know about these guys? Exactly. Honestly, like we might say, hey, he should play. Foster needs more touches down low, or Jarvis needs to play 30-plus minutes a game when he's healthy, and Miles Ruth needs to play 35 minutes a game because he's the only reliable point guard that we have. And after that, we really can't say anything because we don't know. Like, you know, like he can go on his podcast this year and say, this is the official Monmouth Basketball podcast. We know everything that's going on inside of the program. We know what's going on day to day. We know what these guys can do. And Ryan, Mike, and I really don't. So, you know, our opinions aren't going to be as strong, you know, until we're about a third of the way into the season. And it might even take a little bit longer than that because of the level of opponents in the non-conference. Just so you know, both Virginia and Illinois are both top 25 ranked teams to start the year. So if anyone was worried about what numbers are on the side of the teams we're playing. So, yeah, I think in a way, you know, King Rice for the first time in a long time doesn't not that he does, not that he looks over his shoulder or listens to chirping from the fans or anything, but he really doesn't have to now because we don't know any better. So I think it's a very unique situation in that, say Monmouth starts 3-7 in those first 10 games, and, you know, he's cycling through a whole bunch of guys in different lineups and different role allocations. Is anybody really going to be calling King out for it? I certainly don't think the 3 guys here are.
Yeah. I don't think there would be a basis for that because, like you said, we really don't know what we would be missing or what it is we have, and I guess time will tell. And Ryan, I love the Giambi reference with Moneyball, and I think, you know, thinking along those lines, you know, as you were saying that, right? Like, how are we going to produce those points if we had a team last year that could shoot threes? And, you know, as of what's proven right now, we don't know that we have that this year. I think where we make up a lot of that has to be in terms of volume shooting, in terms of getting out on fast breaks, right? So, like, the way I see it, I'm looking at this roster is what I want to know is, can some of these guys that are long that, you know, add to our height, can they put the ball on the floor and can they get out in transition, right? Like, can we get a rebound? Can we get up the floor and, you know, push pace and get fouled and make free throws? Can we play at, you know, I think we were the 4th fastest team in the country during 2020 during the COVID year, right? Like, we put in terms of our offensive pace and, you know, getting up and down the floor. You know, if that's, you know, it could be that that's what we're looking at, where it's really a team that we don't have a reliable 3-point shooter. That's not part of our game, where we're going to try to pound it into the paint and, you know, play fast and try to just get to the cup and get fouled and make free throws. Right. Even last year, we saw a big part of Monmouth's success early in the year, the 11-1 start, was the fact that we were the top free throw shooting team in the country. You know, and that's wasn't the first time that a King Rice team has been a top free throw shooting team in the country. That was the case. I think I could count 3 different seasons where, you know, that was the case through the non-conference. So I think, you know, one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about as far as, you know, where are we going to make up those points is that this team is going to have to play insanely fast, and we're going to find out if our guys can dribble, you know, if they can drive, and then if they can make free throws. I think, you know, one of the things that makes me really happy about Miles Ruth as a starting point guard is the fact that he makes free throws. You know, doesn't seem to get fazed by it. Even when he was a freshman, he knocked down, I think there were several games where he made free throws in the final minutes to ice a game. So I think he's a reliable free throw shooter, a guy who can, one, play on ball defense and, you know, get a steal if there's, you know, a guard who's trying to call out signals and he's not paying attention, he'll pick his pocket, and then he'll go the other way and doesn't really have much regard for his own safety, getting to the lane and getting a layup and trying to finish through contact. So I think that's something that I'm hoping that that's how we start putting together those points, right? You don't have George Pappas, but you do have hopefully a bunch of guys that will push pace and be in great shape.
Yeah, you mentioned Mark Jakari Spence before. I'm interested to see if he gets some minutes this year. I know he's not going to start, and I know he's probably not the first, second, or third off the bench.
We don't know it. We don't know it.
We don't. But very surely, defensively, he was a beast out there. And I know the pace is different there. There's not a whole lot of defense, but he scored 35, 36 in a couple games out there, and he can shoot a little bit. He's more of a driver and hits a little floaters in the lane. But I don't know. I feel like if a couple guys are injured and things aren't going so well, King might put him out there, just say, you know what, go get your run in. Let's see what you can do. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Jakari, log 15, 20 minutes in a game or two, just to see King Rice making a point and saying, I don't care who's on scholarship, who's out here, go play.
He's done it before, right? Max DeLeo was a defensive athletic guard, and he ended up carving a niche for himself. And if there was ever a wide open roster where a non-scholarship guy could take advantage and find a role, it's this roster in this year with this team.
Max was so mad at me that I didn't pick him in that draft. Oh my God. I got to get him on this year. I keep telling him we're going to get him on the podcast, and I keep dropping the ball on it. So at some point, if he's off from his season or if he's got a day, I got to get him on here. So looking from last year to this year, I probably should have started with this, but I kind of got ahead of myself. So last year we go 21-13, 11-9 in the MAC, underperformed a little bit in conference, but wound up getting into the championship, beat Ryder in the semis after upsetting Iona and Rick Pitino. That was so friggin' awesome. I love Pitino walking off the court that night. That was the best. But lose to St. Peter's. We're not going to get into everything tonight. We went through it in March and April, and we know what happened with the refs. We know what happened with St. Peter's going on their run. No need to rehash it. We'll just leave it there. So this year's predictions, from what I've seen on one of the main websites, teamrankings.com has us 9th out of 13th. Busting Brackets, Fansided has us 13th out of 13. CAAsports.com has us 10th. Action Network Betting has us 11th. So I've seen as high as 8th, as low as last and 13th. And I think that's pretty typical for what people are talking about. I think in my mind, if things break very well and Jarvis is healthy and playing well, Foster's out there, a couple of the freshmen like Ball and Collins and Valencia become a thing. Doyle and Allen are playing well. I think the ceiling for this team, I would put in 6th place in the Colonial. And that, again, if things break very well, we're going to a new conference, a lot of young guys. If things break well, I see 6th place as a reasonable possibility. If things go the other way, you might see 11 through 13. I don't know. I don't think we're going to be that low. I really don't. I don't think we're going to be in the bottom 3. I think we're going to be closer to that 8 or 9 spot. I think we're going to surprise some people out there. And there are some weaker teams than us in the conference. But that's what people are talking about. So, going over bold predictions. I'll go first. I see Valencia. Maybe it's not so bold, but I see Valencia being an all-rookie for the Colonial this year. I don't know exactly how their scoring or their awards work. It's different from the MAC maybe, but I see him being a top rookie in the conference this year. And I'm hoping, because we got, nobody on any of the Colonial top 3 teams for the preseason, which deservedly so. We're the new guys in the block. Nobody knows us yet. But I see Valencia being a potential all-rookie in the Colonial this year. So, Mark, what do you got for your bold prediction?
Sure. So I would think that most Monmouth fans are most comfortable with Foster, Vaughn, and Ruth, admittedly so, right? But I'm going to tell you that I think Foster and Vaughn will kind of split a lot of those touches from the forward spot, and that Miles Ruth will continue to be more of a pass-first point guard. Teron Allen will lead Monmouth in scoring points per game average from the wing this year. I am super high on him. Out of everyone on the roster, outside of, that big three of guys that we know a little bit more about, that are more proven, of Foster, Vaughn, and Ruth, I think the sky's the limit for Allen. I was super high on him when we got him as a late signing last year, kind of similar to Valencia this year. I think they're both big recruiting steals, and I love Teron Allen. I think he's going to be the guy that's banging threes. He's physical. He's athletic. He's a lefty. He's smooth. He averaged over 30 a game in a really good New York City high school league. And what we saw from him last year in minimal minutes, really, I don't think will be what we see from him this year, as I think that he rises above that other group of wings and big guards and becomes almost that alpha scorer for Monmouth this year.
So, Ryan, I know we don't advertise in this podcast, but quick plug. If you are a college basketball diehard, spend the $20 a year to get Ken Palm, because it is incredible. Ken Palm is my Wikipedia for the college basketball season. So when we're talking about your preseason previews and where teams line up, I'm looking at Ken Palm. They're probably the closest thing you have to the net. And Ken Palm, I was actually surprised. It had us in 8th place preseason at 9-9 was their projected CAA record for Monmouth, and they said 12-19 was their overall record for Monmouth. And I look at that, and in what they show, right? They rank all teams 1 through 363, and they use it through an analytical model. I won't get into all that, but they rank it's as scientific as it gets. And that's a big part of, I think, how I try to level set with my expectations for the year, along with what we watch and what we know is knowledgeable college basketball teams. But in saying that, right, they have 7 losses that they project. They go game by game and they say, all right, here's where they think they're going to win. And they put a win probability next to it. They have 7 losses that they're being projected for against teams that are outside the top 200. And if I'm looking at that, and right, we know like Monmouth is a strength of program over the years. Like we've been, when we've been good, we've been in the middle of the pack of Division I. So you're talking, middle 100 area. So I think any game that on paper you're going to look at and say, oh, you're losing to a team, outside the top 200, you got to say, all right, you could flip a coin and that could go either way. Like in a rebuilding season like this, and you take some of those games, you say, all right, Mom, it's going to maybe win this one, maybe drop this one. I think you get pretty close to saying that we could have a winning conference record. I don't think that's out of the question to say, all right, maybe we go 10-8 instead of 9-9, like Ken Palm says. So I think my bold prediction is that we have a winning record in the CAA. I don't think we'll have a winning record overall. I think that would be, like I said in the beginning of the episode. I think if you're getting close to that, like a winning record overall, maybe you're 2 or 3 or 4 games short of that. Like, all right, you're competing. Like this is something like we're actually, I think, have reasonable like sights set. But I think my bold prediction for this year is that we have a winning conference record, and you're getting close to the top half of the league.
Definitely, for sure. Let's see. Getting into what's our next topic here. All right, breakout player. Michael, have you go first because you stole mine before I typed it in. So go ahead on your breakout player for Monmouth.
Yeah, so I mean, this takes off from the point I made earlier about like, let's see how well these guys can dribble and can move on the floor. Because Clement Vuga, we've seen him, make plays from last year to see. Because I remember, he knocked down a couple of threes, and I think he was 2 for 3 on threes. So I don't want to use 2 for 3 from the 3-point line to make the point that he's a great 3-point shooter. But at the same time, watching him shoot, you could tell he has touch, and he's not afraid. Like if he's open, he's going to shoot. And I think that given his frame and just kind of how he moves out there, if he could show that he can either put up a shot fake, he can drive, he can he can make contested layups, maybe some and ones. Like that becomes, I think, a huge problem for a defense if you're gonna put him in some spots where maybe you go really big and you have Miles Foster, you have Jarvis Vaughn and Clement Fuga on the floor at the same time, and two of those guys can knock down an open three. Whoa, like that could be a hard team for an opponent to cover. I think, if Clement Fuga can do that, and we also know he can play really good defense, a couple of blocks, couple of steals throughout his time on the floor. Like he can really be a player that, if Monmouth is a surprise team, like it's probably because of Clement Fuga, I think.
Mark, what do you got?
So it's Teron Allen, for all the reasons I said before, but I want to throw Jakari Spence in there as my 1B. I think he'll turn into the backup point guard and give Monmouth a little bit of an older veteran presence there in the backcourt defensively. So I'll throw him in there just because I already talked about Allen.
All right. I was going to go with Vuga, and I do think he's going to have a much bigger year. He's been through the program for 3 years now. He started during the COVID season with no fans in the building. He got a lot of minutes early in the season. It looked really good, and then just kind of lost his way a little bit, and they just weren't playing him very much. Last year, same kind of thing. He didn't really play a whole lot. But when he's on the court, like, he looks pretty good when he's out there. He hits some shots when he's out there. He's a very fundamental player. I do think in an extra year in the program, he's going to realize how good he is. And I do see him even potentially starting this year, depending on how things shake out. And if they want to go super big and go 3 bigs, you have Jarvis out there with Vuga and Foster down low. You never know what they're going to do. I like that call. So I'll go Holmstrom here, because I've been very tough on him the last couple of years. He's taken some ugly shots out there, and he's really had a hard time getting going with this program. But he is a junior now. There's nobody blocking him now. Like, there's nobody stopping Jack Holmstrom's potential this year. In the past, there's always somebody in front of him where he can't really get more than a few minutes on the court. And the thing is, when you're playing for a program that is winning and that every game means a lot, and there's a lot of high pressure moments, and you're only out there for 5 minutes at a time, I get where you're kind of nervous taking a shot, because it's not really your place to be in the offense at that point. You're out there to play defense and just kind of be a body out there and sub for somebody else. So I understand really not wanting to make mistakes out there and being a little skittish. But I think this year, with nobody blocking him and the sky's the limit for him now, I do see him getting better into the offense, taking more shots. He's 2 years behind where Pappas was, but maybe this year you start seeing him take more threes. Even if they don't go in all the time, it took Pappas a full year to realize you got to get the ball in the basket. Like, Pappas was terrible his freshman year shooting the ball. He was awful. But look at what he did his next 3 or 4 years after that, and he was one of the best players in all of the conference, all of mid-major basketball. And maybe Holmstrom starts the year, he takes a lot of shots, and maybe by mid-year he's making 2 or 3 a game, and he's contributing for this team. So I am hoping for that for Holmstrom, and Mama's going to need the shooting, so I'm hopeful there. Let's see, biggest concern for the year. I'll go definitely the shooters. We just don't know who they are, and not so much on the court, but off the court. Patience for the fans and attendance. Listen, we're not going to get 3,000-4,000 people in the building this year. We're just not. Last year was almost a banner year for us, and we were still barely getting 2,500, which made me sick, because hearing from behind the scenes, I know that there were different reasons for why people weren't coming, more even because of COVID, but just some ridiculous reasons people weren't showing up. But overall, I hope the attendance stays at least in the 2,000s this year. Listen, it's basketball, guys. It's indoor college basketball. You're not freezing, watching a football or baseball game. It's 2 hours. It's a half-hour drive for most of us to get to Long Branch. I love it, because I would much rather go to a Monmouth game than a Giant game. I'm a Dallas fan, so I only go once a year. But the fans are gonna be crying.
Really gonna bring up Giant Stadium right now? Really gonna do that to me?
Rough place for you guys.
I go to see Josh Allen play for the first time ever.
Oh, you went?
Yeah, he has the worst game.
Oh,
And now arm's injured. So, yeah, could be a long winter for me for a few reasons.
You go to Giant Stadium, so I'm about a half hour from Monmouth and probably an hour and a half from MetLife. And like I would so much rather leave my house at 6:15, get to Monmouth 6:45, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I'm home by 9:30, done. Like I would so much rather do that than drive to MetLife, 8 o'clock, get there at 9:30 for tailgating, drink all day, get into the stadium 1 o'clock. They're until 4:15. You're back in the parking lot. You're not home till at least 7 o'clock at night. And if your team loses, that's a miserable ride home. And up until this year, if you're a Giants or Jets fan, that was awful. You spent a lot of losing years, and I would so much rather go to a Monmouth game. So listen, if you have $15 to spend, go to Monmouth, bring the kids one night, and cheer them on. It's a fun place to be. Whether they're winning or losing, it's college basketball. It's D1 college basketball. I'm hoping people will come watch the games. Be patient with this team. I don't want to see people screaming on Facebook and calling people out. There's no tension this year, guys. There's no tension. There's no pressure. This isn't a championship built, ready to win team. Give these guys some time. So I'm hoping our fan base can keep in line a little bit this year. Because I mean they're building, guys. Like let's chill out. They're building this year. And I'm usually not the person to be saying that, but let's take a beat this year and let these guys develop a little bit. Final thing before we get out of here. We're just about an hour. We're getting out of here in a few minutes. Final predictions for the year. Mike, what do you got? Conference record, overall record. What do you got?
All right. I'm saying overall record 15-16. 15-16.
I'll sign on for that. I'll sign on. So 9-9 in the Colonial.
Yeah. Some combination. We'll say 10-8 in the CAA and 15-16 overall. I think that's fair. I'll follow that prediction that they have a winning record in the CAA this year, and maybe a shade under 500 for the overall year.
I like it. I think the potential's there for it. I like it. Mark, I don't think you're going to be at
the bottom tier of the CAA is very comparable to where Monmouth is this year. So I'm going to say Monmouth goes 9-22, 6-12 in the CAA. I'll give you wins over Cornell, Lehigh, Manhattan, Stony Brook at home, Hampton at home, NCA&T, Elon at home, at Hampton, at William & Mary. I think they win a few towards the end, and they find one more win in the CAA. So 9-22, 6-12 in the CAA.
All right. I'm kind of right in the middle of you two. I'm going 12-19, so we're avoiding the 20-loss season, which we haven't had in a while, and 7-11 in the Colonial. I don't know if we quite get to 500. I'm hoping we do. I have us just a tick below that. A couple buzzer beaters here and there might get you there. But, I think there's potential to win against Norfolk at home, Cornell at home, steal one at Lehigh maybe. I don't think we're going to beat Ryder on the road. I don't. At Manhattan should be a win now that Masiello and that whole disaster happened. There's probably
I just want to say if nothing comes out scandalous against Steve Masiello, I know him and King are very close. I would love to have that psycho running up and down behind our bench as a special advisor.
I know where you're going there.
Also have him plugged into the transfer portal because he gets talent.
I'll take him. Charlotte, there's potential for a win there. They're a little bit of a bigger conference. I do think they could win 4, 5, 6 out of conference maybe. And then if you go 7-11 in the Colonial, you're right at that 12-13 win mark. I do think they'll be okay. I don't think we're going to see a team that gets embarrassed this year. I think they are going to fight. Listen, there might be a couple of nights where you take a lump. You might lose a night, 89-64. Like those nights might happen. But then you might come out and upset Hofstra and win 72-70 in a defensive game. And maybe they have one guy out that night, or maybe you just play great defense and key in on their two guys and miss some shots. You don't know. So I do have some hope for this year. Am I expecting you to hang a banner? No. but I do think there's a lot of potential in this team. And they're all trying out for next year. So I do like kind of where this year could go. But again, temper expectations, Monmouth fans. Do not get crazy. We don't want King in the press talking about people and, talking about fans not being patient. Let's not even go there this year. I'm not going to get into all that already. Just be patient. Give it time. Let's see how these guys develop this year. Any last thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm actually really disappointed at the level of calmness and maturity that we're showing on the podcast for the opener. It just doesn't feel right. But if one thing that we always say, we say we're the voice of Monmouth Nation, we're the voice of the Hawks fans, and we just hope that you hear the message that we're giving you. In other years, we rally you around. Last year we told you it was MAC tournament championship or bust. We don't feel like it's that this year. So, have patience. Try to be a new, calmer, gentler, more understanding version of yourself, like Ryan Kinghorn is now.
You want to fire Mark? Screw North Carolina and Hubert Davis. Screw him.
The parting thought here for me, I think along the lines of what you said, Ryan, with coming out to games and it being a good venue, a good entertainment product, is King Rice's teams always play hard. That's something that you can always count on. As far as whether or not we make open shots, that's to be determined. Whether or not we shoot above 50% from the field is to be determined. Record to be determined. But King Rice's teams play hard, and I expect that this season, they're going to be entertaining to watch, at least in that respect. Like they'll give you a good basketball game if you're going to come out and watch this team play. Like you won't be disappointed in terms of the level of basketball you'll see on the floor.
Mike, I do have to ask. You're saying people are going to come out. Can you just quickly speak to how many people are going to come out to some of those home games?
Oh, I can't give up any state secrets here, Mark.
Notably, November and Christmas break games.
I don't even want to go there.
Yeah,
I don't want to go there. Right. Let's just hit 1,000 those nights. Oh God. All right. On that note, thanks everybody for listening. We are ready for a whole new season of Monmouth basketball. Make sure you get out to as many games as possible. Cheer these young guys on. They're going to need it. Again, let's see how these young guys do. Thanks everybody for listening. Stay safe out there. Have a good night.